My name is Sarah Bob, and I am the founding artistic director of the New Gallery Concert Series based in the greater Boston area in the United States. The New Gallery Concert Series is in its 21st season and is a coming together of new music and new visual art. From There to Here was our second ever virtual event, presented in January 2021, and we're thrilled to be able to show it again today at 2 p.m. Eastern Time as a YouTube live premiere. We'll make sure to put the link in the chat to the event, though you can always go to the events page on our website, www.newgalleryconcertseries.org. Before we get started with our pre-concert talk, I wanted to take a moment to thank the Laundry School of Music of Bard College for their partnership and support, all the participants in this stellar program, and of course, our panelists today, who will be introducing themselves in a moment. Though you'll see the complete program involves other composers and performers, ranging from dancing to the words of George Floyd's brother, to wonderfully lighthearted American train-inspired fiddle playing. In this hour, we are focusing on Vanessa Lann's piano quintet, One Life. It's coming together with Rashon Rah-Lik Briggs's artwork and its impact. I encourage our audience to use the Q&A to ask questions. And bear with me as I will do my best to get to all of them. If not immediately, I will make sure to take the time in our last 10 minutes together. We'll be done. This will run about till 1:55, so you have a few minutes before our program begins at 2. So now I'd love for our panelists to introduce themselves. Let's start with Rashon Rah-Lik Briggs, our visual artist. Thanks for being here. So if you could tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, where you're zooming from, where you live, and about the work that's on the program, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, New Concert Gallery Series. Thank you, Lonely Music. I'm really happy to be here once again with Vanessa and Fiona and Peter Begg. This is really a good opportunity to reconnect with my family from earlier in the year. It's sort of like a reunion of sorts. My name is Rashon Briggs. A lot of my friends from college know me as Rah-Lik, so I kind of go by both names and live in both worlds. I am a high school teacher at Hollywood High School in Los Angeles, grades 9 through 12. Big shout out to the Performing Arts Magnet. That's the one I'm connected to. I currently live in Los Angeles. I'm currently Zooming from South Carolina, in Sumter, South Carolina, my aunt's home on spring break. Give a shout out to all the teachers on spring break or on the way to spring break. And I was asked by Sarah if I wanted to be a part of this program. And I made sure I wrote down, through her persistence and insistence that I stay on it, I was able to donate and give images that I felt like would inspire the artists, would inspire some energy and involvement. And, you know, I was one of those things where I think I gave her like 1,000 puzzle pieces. And then with bated breath in January, I sort of waited to see how the puzzle came together. And I was obviously overcome and just inspired by the way she kind of laid it all out with every single performance piece. So it was first time ever seeing my imagery put to music. It's something that I wish to do with photos of my own that I've taken. So it was actually a really beautiful lesson in how to lay the images with the music and connect to the artists. And then also I think the anticipation of seeing how they would mesh and everything else, and being really satisfied at the end. But it was my first time ever being a part of a program, and it was one to remember. So thank you for having me again. Hello, family, friends, hello.
Thank you, Rashon. And Vanessa, why don't you tell us a little bit?
Well, hi, Sarah. Hi, everybody. I'm so pleased to be here, and thank you for including me, the New Gallery Concert Series, Laundry School of Music, and to all the people making and creating and being part of the inspiration and working together and performing and sharing in this great project. It's really fun. And I'm sitting in Rotterdam, the Netherlands. I'm a composer. I'm originally from the United States. I was born in New York. I went to college in Massachusetts. And I got a grant at Harvard to come to Europe, the Netherlands, for a year to study music composition, and I stayed for 30 years now. So I write for Western European classical instruments mainly. I love working on commission. I love writing for people I know or for an organization which has an unusual project or an unusual meaning. In this case, the piece of mine that is on the program this evening was commissioned originally by the Brundebar Festival in Newcastle Gateshead in England. And the festival is a celebration of the creative work of people who either perished in the Holocaust or were survivors of the Holocaust, and it remembers the terrible tragedy, but also looks at the beauty that so many people have brought to the world through their art. And in this case, the festival theme was childhood, and very specifically Hanni Begg, the mother of Peter and Fiona, and her life and what she was amazingly able to do after very, very tragic circumstances in Europe in the 40s, as I'm sure we'll speak a lot about. And in thinking about her, in thinking about the situation, I originally wrote this piece. We'll talk about that as well. And to have it included in not only this wonderful new gallery concert series celebration, but to work with Rashon on his visuals and to have everything become completely new and at the same time celebrate something that has been, brings together an entire full circle. And I'm looking forward so much to hearing also. It's an honor to have Peter and Fiona, the family of Hanni Begg, here with us today. And I'm looking forward to also learning even more than what I knew in the original sense of putting this piece together. And also finding out from Rashon how he approached the new layers of what was already existing and how that inspired his work. So I'll say more later, but I'm very pleased to be here and to have this shared experience.
Thank you so much. And that brings us to both Peter Begg and Fiona Begg, the children of Hanni Begg, who inspired One Life. And it is so, what an honor to have you both here. Again, if you could introduce yourselves, where you are, and maybe talk a little bit about your mom and anything else you'd like to add at this point.
Do you want me to start? I'm Peter Begg.
Either one.
I'm Hanni's son. Is that enough? No, I'm joking.
You want it to be.
We will say, I'm sure, a lot more about Mum later, but I have to say, first of all, you're talking about an honour. This is a huge honour for me and Fiona to be here at all. And in some ways, quite hard to believe. But Mum's life was amazing. She was a Holocaust survivor. And just the fact that she'd survived was a miracle. Therefore, the fact that we're alive at all is a miracle. Because how she survived, I do not know. But she did. She lost all her family pretty well. But she managed to get through it. In 1949, she came to the UK, and the following year met Dad. Dad was a medical student, and Mum was trained to be a nurse. I'm sure we'll talk about that more about that later. Dad got a job in the northeast of England, in Middlesbrough, and then Gisborough, which is a small market town near Middlesbrough in North Yorkshire, and that's where Fiona and I were brought up. I was born in Gisborough and went to school there, and a very nice little place near the North Sea. And then I went to university and studied German and French, language and literature. And after that, did teacher training, like Rashon. I'm a teacher, and but a different area. And I met my wife, who is from former Yugoslavia, Croatia. And because of her, I decided to go out to Zagreb in 1982, when Yugoslavia was still communist. It was a very interesting experience. And I lived there for 5.5 years, we got married there. And I taught English as a foreign language in a language school. Very good and very big language school in Zagreb, 12,000 students. And that was an amazing experience. I didn't know what to expect. I knew nothing about Yugoslavia, really. I was very ignorant. But the students, certainly in Croatia, were very, I think it's fair to say they were really happy to have a native speaker because they didn't have many. And I was already on to winner, and everybody was nice to me and unbelievably hospitable. It was a lovely experience. And then we came back to this country, and Stephanie was born, our daughter. She's 32 now. And I taught German and French in a comprehensive school. That's a secondary school in Fleets, where I live in Hampshire. So that's in the south of England, near London. For 18 years. I had a break from teaching for a few years, a few little jobs, which I don't think they were for me, but anyway, that's another story. I did work for Lego, that was interesting, and a great company. Anyway, I was missing teaching, so I went back to teaching, and the last 4 or 5 years, I've been teaching English again as a foreign language in London, and enjoying that. Adults, enough of children, sorry. And I like teaching adults using Zoom now because of the COVID situation. I'd just like to feel sorry for myself and say that I had a vaccination yesterday. So Mum might have been a Holocaust survivor, but I am a AstraZeneca survivor because I'm still here. And it's a bit painful today, and but it's not too bad. Nothing compared. I wouldn't even dream with what Mum went through. It's really good to be here. I'm sure I'm going to say, Fiona and I'm going to say a lot more about Mum. And it's really lovely to meet Rashon and Sarah, and met Vanessa before, and we'll talk more about the Brundibar, she's mentioned already, festival, when she was commissioned to write this amazing piece. You have to understand, it was just, we were gobsmacked. I mean, this was a piece inspired by our mum. And okay, I'll say more about it later. Enough from me.
So hi, I'm Fiona Begg. I'm Hanni's daughter and sister to Peter. I live up in Gisborough, which was our home where we spent our childhood. In fact, I live just 10 minutes away from Mum and Dad's house, which is nice. So I'm constantly reminded, usually if I go shopping, everybody knew Mum and Dad, and particularly as we're talking about Mum today, and often stop and chat and say that I miss your mum or some nice memory. She was a very popular lady in Gisborough, and very talkative. She would often spend a couple of hours just to go and do a small shop, because she was always bumping into half of Gisborough and half of Dad's patients, ex-patients. So often she kind of got lost in the shop and talking. She was a very charismatic lady, and I just feel complete honour to be here with all such clever and talented people. Unfortunately, I can't play the piano like you, Sarah. I wish I did. I did attempt as I was growing up, but I got really bored and I couldn't be bothered to practice, and would lie about all the practice I'd done to my piano teacher, who knew fine well that I hadn't done any. I work at a local...
We always know.
So, yeah, absolutely. So I'm sad that I didn't keep that up. I wish I had. But I work in a local university. I've been there for 23 years, and I do kind of student assessments, so putting marks on for students, getting them out to students, etc., attending boards. I have done various things. I've worked in hotels, including one in Germany, in Cologne, because I wanted to improve my German, because I was with a very clever family, and I only did it to a certain level, to O level. So when I was 16, and my dad had taught himself German, you know, he was really clever and lots of languages. And then Pete could speak fluently as well, having done French and German at Cambridge. So I felt rather inferior to that. So I went out and was a Zimmermädchen, a chambermaid in a 5-star hotel. And that proved that it was a really silly idea, because the German cleanliness is 5-star. And I'm not the most physical of people. So it was really quite a tough job. But I also wanted to improve my German, and I wanted to get closer to Mum. I think I wanted to find out more. I only lasted 3 or 4 months, but I did go and stay with her best friends in Berlin, who'd helped her a lot. They were also Jews, so Ilse and Werner Rewald. And in that week, I can remember Ilse talking about the fact that, you know, of course, we talked a lot about Mum's past and their past, and about the fact that Mum had managed to create, you know, new life, which kind of ties in with Vanessa's title of One Life, and that there were offspring, and that was really exciting. And I think Mum would absolutely have loved this and been totally honoured for Vanessa to write this piece and for you all to be here. It's just absolutely fantastic. And when we saw the One Life clip again for the second time, we saw Rashon's photography, which was amazing. I like to think of myself as an amateur photographer, but not quite along the lines of Rashon. So yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Well, there's so much to talk about. So let's get into first with Vanessa and Rashon. So originally, the idea for this, it was originally going to be played and put together in May of 2020, and it was canceled because of COVID. And then we pushed it into this virtual world. Originally, it was going to be a live event. Rashon's images were going to be stagnant on the walls. And Vanessa's piece was one of other pieces on the program. And I have to say, there was a bit of a struggle for me when we were going in this realm, because initially, I would not have put Rashon's work with this particular piece. I liked it there as part of the whole context, but in this form of it being virtual and being really forced together in a different way than if it was more passive on the walls. I was like, was this the match I would have made? And then I came around and I realized that these different angles and perspectives coming together actually was the exact thing we needed. Now, that being said, I would love for each of you to talk about, why does this collaboration work? How did you feel, you know, both of your works were created before you had seen each other's work? It's not that you built this together, it was a bringing together. Why do you think this works?
Let's see. I'll say that when we sat down, at our first little interview that we posted before, like I noticed Vanessa and I had you were mediating. We had like an energy that was going back and forth. I think that was sort of connected to from the start. It was just kind of like okay, well, we're just talking about what makes her music and her creation great. We're talking about what makes the images and things that I create. And then I guess I kind of felt like we were sort of walking this, okay, you meet someone on a path and you're sort of walking this path together, and let's just see what we come across, you know, from two different sides. I'm taking photographs, and, you know, when I'm out trying to grab an image or grab images to share, like I'm thinking of a story in my own head, or how I want to explain the history of this image, or where was I in the story, and so on and so forth. And then when I saw your final presentation, like, it was amazing. I was like, wow, like, you know, when you create something, you're sort of thinking, well, this is what I was doing when I was taking these photos, and it was over years, you know, so it wasn't necessarily after I met Vanessa, I had these photos. And then I looked at and heard her piece, and I was like, okay, wow, this could be something. And when I saw it, it was like, man, it was almost as if it was meant to be together. It was like, okay, well, this wasn't the soundtrack I had in my mind, and or the connection or the meaning behind it when I first took the images. But when I saw it connected to Vanessa's piece, I was like, wow, this was the soundtrack that it was meant to be connected to, and then be connected to the story of Mrs. Begg was, you know, it was sort of like, it was sort of that moment in time. And I know, you know, we had talked about the presentation in Cambridge and so on and so forth. And so in this moment of time, during this whole Zoom presentation and Zoom everything, it was sort of like we're all meshed together in this one screen of 4 squares. It was like it was the perfect thing to mesh with. Okay, well, here's 2 different artists, 2 different perspectives, 2 different countries, you know, in that sense. And then let's put it together and see how everything flows in the middle. And it was, you know, I was, like I said, I was sort of speechless that it really went together. And I was like, wow, maybe that was the way it was always supposed to be. And it presented in its way on the night of the show.
When we were meeting each other for the first time, we were also talking about how creation is so magical and inspiration comes in the strangest ways and in the most unexpected ways. I really love what you've done, Rashon, with the work of mine and what you've added to it with the colors and the symbolism and at times what could be considered the simplicity in the most gorgeous sense of the word. My piece is celebrating life, celebrating the life of Hanni Begg and her family and what she brought to the world. And it's also celebrating every individual. My piece has to do with society and everything that's going on, but also the strength of one person and one human being and one energy and one dream and one journey. Speaking of journeys, I applied to the Netherlands organization that would allow me to travel in May of 2020 to be with Sarah and the other wonderful musicians in Cambridge, Massachusetts and in Boston, and to have a chance to rehearse with this wonderful group of people and this fantastic project. And when that didn't happen, it was also at first very disappointing. How would we be able to realize this? And somehow the ability to put everything together across the ocean months before we even worked physically in the same space as the music and the people performing it all together, it added a layer because we were able to share continuously our thoughts and our experiences. And it became something absolutely wonderful that in many ways, I think, added instead of detracted from what would have been the live experience with visuals hanging on the wall. But I thought this brought together so many things. I also think that the use of your images, Rashon, and my music inspired by your mother, who I wish I could have met. I'll talk more about that later. But I also think that combined with the imagery of Sarah, you and the other 4, in my case, performing the piece live, being there with masks on, and the way that the video used Rashon's imagery at times, and then at times, the images of you as performers, and some very surprising use of the space in which you were performing. I won't say what it is, but also something very powerful at the end, involving the space and involving the presence of you and the others performing, combined with the imagery of Rashon and the story of your mother, Peter and Fiona. I thought the whole thing worked so well in the format that we had now. So
definitely,
you know, it's interesting also as a performer, you know, feeling the you use the word power and strength. I mean, the piano part especially is a very bold powerful tool in the whole thing. And but there's also this real sense of humanity. And I think what you're saying touches on everything. I mean, not only the the piece itself, but what it's based on. And then, you know, that was my first time, like, and I'm saying maybe like one of 3 times in this in this year that I've actually gotten to work with people in person. Mm-hmm. So there was that element as well. But also, you know, for me, this was also a new creative outlet because I had the opportunity to be, after we recorded it, really listening to your piece over and over again, deciding which images of Rashon's goes with what, where, and it was very intimate, even though we were never actually in the same room together. And it was very therapeutic. So I thank you both for that too. So I know the impact of the piece was very strong for me to play, but also then again to keep listening to, and then to also add the element of Rashon's incredible artwork. And I'm wondering with Fiona and Peter, I mean, I'm curious, what was the impact for you, not only hearing the piece, but knowing it was being created? Were you worried about anything? No offense, Vanessa, of course, but like, you know, your life or your mother's life is being put into the hands of someone else, right? In a way, yeah, I'm curious what the impact was for you, even growing up, and then to come to this piece. Oh, sorry, I have to unmute. You have to unmute there. There you go.
For me, firstly, with the music, I'm not someone who knows much about classical music, but it was just a year, the first time we heard Vanessa's wonderful piece. So it was not long after, relatively speaking, after Mum's death. So I remember, no offense to Vanessa, saying it was joyous, but I actually came out feeling it was quite harrowing. And I remember the individual piano, the one note, and I envisaged Mum's brother and sister possibly, you know, in Auschwitz. So I came away feeling, oh, right, it was quite harrowing. And then we had the chance in January to hear it again. And actually, I think Pete can speak, obviously, but we both said it sounded different. It was much more joyous. Now, we heard it 3 years after Mum's death, so maybe a lot of the grieving, obviously that's still ongoing, but 3 years had passed, so it was much more joyous. I remember I really enjoyed it, and with the photography, that was just amazing. So maybe that helped lighten it. It was a focus away from, you know, the music, but I was still moved, and it's still a big honor that Vanessa's written this piece. I don't know if Pete, you want to come in at that point, and then I can talk about childhood and stuff.
Okay, well, I guess a similar reaction to Fiona in Gateshead. It was very, very powerful occasion just being there. You know, we couldn't believe it. And Vanessa, this lovely lady, talented American composer, written a piece inspired by our mum. It's hard to get your head around it.
Yeah,
that's the truth. And so I'm listening to this and think, oh my God, this is inspired by my mum.
I know.
And it was just very difficult for me to say something more, if you like, technical about it. It was just very powerful. It did seem, and I'm not saying it negatively, it did seem darker the first time, but it was a combination, you know, sitting there and being very emotional. And yes, it was closer in terms of chronology to Mum's death. And then this experience, yes, it was different, partly, no doubt, because of the visuals and watching it on the video. And it was very interesting. It was different. I mean, don't get me wrong, both occasions, the musicians were fantastic. In Gateshead, you know, Sasha Reichliner, whose festival it is, beautiful violinist, and they were all, you know, top class. And Sarah and your quintet, I mean, it's both excellent. So it's nothing to do with the musicians. It's just our subjective reaction to it, probably, as Mum's children. But no, it was very interesting. It was not a different piece, but it was almost, there were elements of, is this really, you know, it was different. So it was a privilege to listen to and see both. And Vanessa, I think maybe because of the time, more time had passed, I think I appreciated the second performance more. I'm not sure it was any better. Perhaps it was, the visual impact as well, the element, because that was very clever. The whole thing was, well done, Sarah. The whole concept is brilliant, in my opinion. And it worked. Everything. It was a very interesting program. And I'd never seen anything like that. It made me think, why don't people do this before? Right. Maybe they have. I've not seen it. Very clever. I thought, by the way, music and art are both a kind of therapy. And in these times of COVID, where, it's really difficult for everybody at the moment, it was very therapeutic, except that we had this different layer of emotional reaction because it was our mum. But no, I don't know what else to say, except thank you. It was amazing.
And with that other layer, I mean, I guess that's only you two can really answer that question. None of us can have that experience. And again, as an outsider, I mean, someone who played it, that's a different kind of intimacy. But I found it so powerful. Do you feel like...
Yeah, it's very powerful. That will be the word for it.
Yeah.
Do you feel like...
My main adjective for your piece, Vanessa. It's very good, very interesting, very... I felt very emotional, but it was powerful, yeah. It had to be, didn't it?
And do you feel like this is something your mother would have... It would have resonated some...
Yeah, oh, well, mum loved music, first of all. I felt at Gateshead that she was kind of there in spirit with us. Oh, no, she would have been... we have a word in England, I don't know if you use it, gobsmacked. Absolutely amazed.
Yeah, she would have...
That was inspired by her, really. So thank you, Vanessa.
Yeah, thanks from me as well. I think she would have been totally honoured and would have absolutely loved to. I'm sure she's watching down on us, so amazing.
Well, thank you for saying that. And I heard so many wonderful things about your mother prior to beginning the piece. And she had also been a supporter of the festival, and everybody knew, as you said, Fiona, I heard that she was so friendly and so caring and so giving and so loving, and that she would stop with everybody on the street and ask them how they were and really genuinely, honestly want to know everything about people and how they were. And I went with my husband to Berlin and found what I believe is on the Augsburger Strasse, where she lived for a time, and tried to get into what she was experiencing at the worst and most difficult time, and as well to get a sense of the joy that she brought other people. And from the Talmud, he who saves just one life saves a world entire. And she escaped from the most awful tragedy imaginable and brought so much beauty and joy to the world in the years that followed. So to have that also as an inspiration is quite extraordinary. Also, when I have written a piece, there's the inspiration that goes into the writing of the notes and the making of the first performance, and very often the people for whom I'm originally writing it. But one of the very, very big joys for me is to have people like Sarah and the New Gallery concert series take something that exists on paper and breathe new life into it and give their own interpretation, as they so beautifully did, in a new program with other works, with the visual art of Rashon and other circumstances on a different medium instead of being live. And so the new life that comes to a piece that already existed is like a double layer. And it's what I actually very often look forward to the most, is to see how something that already exists and was born in January of 2019 goes on its own journey and has a little bit of Sarah Bob put into it and a little bit of Massachusetts. And then the other thing about Rashon's imagery in my particular piece, which is not the same imagery as the rest of the from there to hear a program, which will be aired in 20 minutes. The power of the sun, which one will see in this collaboration of his imagery of the sun, and the simplicity and the naturalness of the sun, the life-giving energy of the sun, but also the quietude and the peace of the sun. It's all very much related to things in my piece which I believe are there, which not everybody has to see, but I found that also a very big strengthening factor. And you both, Peter and Fiona, said that the second time you heard it with Rashon's imagery in a different context, you had a different feeling. And I think that's kind of the way it should be. And that's ideally the way new collaborations make something happen. So I'm just grateful to everybody here for that. So,
Vanessa, can I ask you something? I'm curious. It was really wonderful that you went to Berlin to see where Mum had lived. How much did that help and inspire you to write the piece?
Oh, it's very often it's not a tangible thing, but it's just a feeling of space and presence. And, you know, it's, well, there's
a pity that you never met Mum, but that's life.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And I'm so glad to have met the two of you, and that Sarah now has made the coming together possible again, because also at the premiere of the piece, when it was first written 2 years ago, it was wonderful to meet you, but it was also such a intense experience in a way that reflection wasn't as possible.
No, that's right. Yep.
Yeah.
We just got a really wonderful question for Rashon, actually, which is very similar to the question I had already prepared to ask you. I'm going to go with the attendees question. You're okay. So the attendee says, this project derives parts of its strength by looking at the life of one victim of one of the greatest outrages in human history. But Rashon's contribution brings another outrage into the picture, slavery. Can he tell us a bit more about his own family history through the generations and how it influences his work? So to give people context, especially those who have not seen the program that we're showing at 2 o'clock, this piece, One Life, was one part of the program, but Rashon also, we will be featuring his Cotton Comes Home series. Well, actually, I'll let you explore. I'll let you talk about that, Rashon. But yeah, I think that's a great question.
Well, I think that, you know, when I was talking to you about the, being on this panel today, I thought about, okay, well, you know, sometimes you sit down with a camera and you kind of go out and you just explore and you take pictures and take pictures of things that grab your eye or could tell a story. And from the Cotton Comes Home series, you know, a simple expedition to go out and grab some logs or some wood to throw into the fireplace during the winter or during Thanksgiving with my dad while in South Carolina turned into something else. And I just so happened to have my camera with me. And as we walk through this, the land that belongs to my grandparents, there was cotton that had been growing and it was out of season. So some of the fields were sort of barren, some of the cotton sort of like drooping, and, you know, there was some still on the bulbs that were pretty fresh. And so, you know, as he was telling me about, you know, when he was a kid and how, you know, the surrounding land was filled with cotton and so on and so forth, and how this land, you know, belongs to, it's in the family, it sort of I started to look at it as a moment of storytelling, you know, which wasn't altogether planned. Like sometimes you have an intent, I'm going to try to get these photos. And so I would say the photos from the Cotton Comes Home series, it wasn't with an intention of sort of like, let me look for this and let me look for that. It was sort of like we went to this space and all of a sudden the story just kind of unfolded around. And then my dad started telling me about when he was a kid and how the kids would run around and what started to transpire and kind of lay out in front of me was, you know, as these memories he was telling me, he was sharing with you were coming back. it was like, okay, well, you know, I'm from a different generation, and I always remember coming to visit my grandparents, and you know, they no longer lived on that plot of land, but I remember going with them to kind of visit and make sure everything was okay, and people use it to plant and everything else. Now, not cotton, obviously, and so I have different memories of going back to that space, and then walking with my dad in that period of time. I was sort of watching him remember as a kid, like, okay, obviously it tells a different story because he was, you know, a kid and running around, and you know, like some of it was, you know, difficult to tell, and you know, kind of tells the story of this land that his parents had been given, that his parents owned. You know, they weren't given the land, excuse me. His parents owned the land and bought the land, and what it meant for him back then, and then also retracing the steps to, you know, the bigger picture, which is, you know, it is a cotton field, more soybean than cotton now, but it grows, but both of them do grow. And then the connections to being in southern part of the United States, Somerton, South Carolina, in particular, and the history of cotton and how important it was to establish the economy in the United States during that time period. You know, like, you know, cotton. I think the phrase is cotton was king, or cotton created the kingdom of the United States, and you know, and gave its independence from the rest of Europe and England. And so one of the things that gets lost sometimes when you're telling, you know, we skipped to the Revolutionary War, but there was a long period where cotton kind of created the economy that the United States, the pillars of the United States was established on. Like, you know, you can't get to a constitution and talk about freedoms and so on and so forth and breaking away from England unless you have the economy and sort of like the sort of basis to kind of stand up and want to get away from England. And so, you know, the labor that these Africans who were brought to America here to do it for free, and for the companies to be able to benefit from free labor for all those years, and then turn around and tell, you know, England, you know, the rest of the world, like, hey, we have this product that grows here in America, and we're going to send it out to the world and build an economy on it. I felt like that was sort of the idea. So the idea of cotton comes home is like, okay, well, you wear cotton, it's on your clothes, it's in your whatever you wear, and you just don't think about, you know, it is not always thought about all the way down to the bulb and how it starts there. You know, it was sort of, you know, it starts there with free labor. It starts there with the savage treatment of, you know, generations and generations of Africans, you know, who became, you know, citizens of this country. And then also just the whole, from my perspective, I guess, telling the story from that moment all the way to the present, where my dad and I, here we are back in this space, a space I come and visit often. I'm here in South Carolina right now. And so it takes on, as you get older, and I've been teaching for, you know, 20 plus years, these images and these thoughts and these things and things that I heard my grandparents talk about, and things I've been able to read and discover on my own, things that are not in history books and things that are hidden from history books, start to lay out in front of you. And so that kind of helped to add to a story or a message I wanted to convey. But I also want to say, just really quickly, in terms of being connected to the One Life piece as well, I think that when we look back on this moment, and you were going to obviously replay the presentation, you know, one of the first things one of my administrators, she said to me, she saw the piece, and she sent me an email, said, I had no idea you were doing this while teaching and doing everything else. And I think one of the things that'll come out of this whole presentation that'll last forever will be the fact that, Sarah, you were able to take these visuals and these musical pieces and mesh together this performance that was, like you said, that was, when you thought of it and conceptualized, it was all of us together in a hall, and just that energy and just that collaboration in that sense, and create something that I think not only will stand the test of time, but it also tells a different story. Like, well, how come you weren't together? Or how come, well, Vanessa, I look forward to, you know, eventually in my life meeting you. And so like, it's almost like this was what we did in the pandemic. Those people who had creative spirits and artists and so on and so forth, we sort of relied on each other and kept moving forward. And so I'll always thank you for the opportunity and be able to present it in that way, Sarah, like, you know, in a new concert gallery series, for giving me the opportunity to tell my story for the first time. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, thank everyone. that actually is also part of the question about speaking to the importance of relaying, whether it's your personal story or someone else's story or society's story through art. And I find it really beautiful, Rashon, how you say you went out into the field with your dad with your camera, thinking about that moment. And yet I know when I first saw your Cotton Comes Home series, and just this one image of cotton growing on the field was so provocative. And I don't know if that's what you'd intended, but it brought up so many ideas and feelings and angers and shames about our country and our relationships. And how did you feel? And even when you talk with your students, I know you said you physically brought this cotton back to your students in California. How is that?
I'll simply say, like, from a distance, you see it from a distance is a whole different perspective, because you'd see fields of cotton here in the South, and so when you're driving by really fast, it just kind of creates just a visual of just a sort of a white stream of cotton and stem. But then when I was there and we were talking, and we were kind of grabbing some to bring back to New Jersey. When I got up close is when you really kind of can see the details on how the cotton grows as a plant, out of the ground. And so it was like, okay, well, in one respect, like something blooming out of this piece, there is beauty to that. It's a sort of like, watching a flower bloom in full speed. Like, there's beauty to what evolves from this space. And then in that instance, also, as you get a little closer, you look at some of the sharp parts of the cotton bulb and the damage that it did to these Africans who were kind of pulling from the cotton, and the damage it did to their hands. And so we took that cotton and we took it to New Jersey, and then I was able to send some to Los Angeles. And so my students in Los Angeles had never seen cotton up close. And so being able to use the photo I have where they can kind of zoom in nowadays, we used to zoom in with a photo by looking up closely, but now they can just digitally zoom in and kind of look at the details. And so they were to say, like, oh, it looks like this, it looks like that. And wow, it sort of looks sort of dirty. And they would kind of look like, that's not the cotton I get when I go to, buy it from the store, and sort of being able to tell them, well, it has to be clean and so on and so forth. And there was a cotton gin, and this is sort of how the whole process goes. But actually, I think for them, they would actually physically feel what it looks like, and actually, they would always ask, "Can I touch it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you can." It's you can, like, you can't hurt it. Like, you're not going to hurt anything. The worst part, it'd probably break off, but anything else. And so it kind of, for me, I think, if anything, it was able to kind of bring the story home a little bit more to them, and maybe connect to students, where we learn that sort of that hands-on experience is how to create connections that go forward. And so with the visual, and so they can actually look at it up close and see with their own two eyes, and then also they kind of feel it and touch it and kind of create a connection to their own history was important. But it was, from there to here was, I picked it from there. We drove it to New Jersey, and then it was sent to California, Los Angeles, where I live. And so just the kind of the traveling of this particular story, and then the imagery. Like I said, when Sarah asked me, I was like, this is something I would love for other people to see, and also maybe have a connection to it, and connect to their own spirit and their history.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's really.
The word that was in my mind, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just saying it was important work. Go ahead, Vanessa.
The word that was in my mind was indeed the word connection. This piece of mine might have been inspired by the incredible story of one person, but whoever is listening to it is also going to be reflecting the way they hear it in their own life. I also have a history of coming from a Jewish family where many perished in the Holocaust, and that does affect me and my story. But stories are also the work that you do, Rashon, for instance, is going to affect all of us in a different way, some of whom will have similarities in their story to your ancestors, and some who will see their own stories and will connect in a different way. And so from there to here, the title of this event and this project is so beautiful and collaborative, because we all react in different ways. I mean, to tragedy, even the way that one person will interpret a piece of art, and will see something of their own lives in it that wasn't even necessarily intended by the person who created it. That's what this is all about. And that's why it's so special, Sarah, that you put everybody together, and that you brought our work together and our stories and our lives, as well as the listeners and the viewers who get their own stories triggered by the experience of all the pieces on the program and all the works. And so one life is really all of our lives. It's about our individual way of listening and seeing and communicating, and it's about the entire society and history and present. And this is such a difficult and challenging and terrible time in so many ways right now, 2021, and everything that's been going on for so many people. And maybe by sharing performance and stories about the positive and about the negative, it allows us to connect as humans. That's what music is about, isn't it? And that's what storytelling is about, and that's what art is about, and pictures, and yeah, connecting. So thank you, Sarah, as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a perfect way to end this. We have 2 minutes. I see someone had their hand up, but I can't call on you, but feel free to use the chat to ask a question. I also want to remind everyone, thank you, Doria, for putting in the chat. There's a link to the show that starts in a few minutes at 2 o'clock our Eastern time. Or should I just say in 6 minutes, will begin. And there are also program notes. There's a link to that too. So you can learn much more about all the performers and artists and the components to this. You can always, of course, reach out. And also, if you are interested in any of Rashon's artwork, we want to promote Rashon's artwork. So please reach out to New Gallery Concert Series, or Kimberly, there you go. If you look in the chat, there's some information for you. I'm a big fan of Rashon's. I'm a big fan of everyone who's participated. The New Gallery Concert Series season finale is May 1st. It will also be virtual. If you're not on our mailing list, please join it or stay in touch. All that social media stuff, newgalleryconcertseries.org, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, it's all out there. But really what Vanessa said, it's very much about connection for us too. We want to get our art out to you and be a part of this worldwide community. So if there are no other questions, go take your 5-minute break and please tune back in. I'll be viewing and there to live chat if you have any questions, or want to banter for any reason. I don't know. I think you'll just be mesmerized by what you see. And thank you all so much. Thank you, Rashon, Vanessa, Fiona, Peter. Please stay in touch. And I'm so grateful to each and every one of you. So thank you.